aren't you?
I'm afraid.
Cool. Okay, so let's start talking about what are the principles behind using splints. Why would we use a splint? And then we're going to jump into what's the fears of using splints. That leads us into talking about joint, like the biomechanics, so that people have a greater understanding of joints. And then we're going to flick back into OA and keep it on track and do some cases. And then at the end, we're going to look at some timelines. So let's first of all talk about, why do people use splints? What do they bring to the party?
First of all, I think when you say the word splint, most people think of two bits of wood and a bit of cloth and sort of bunging it round a broken bone. Put at its very simplest, a splint is effectively a way of immobilizing a joint, or more than one joint. Usually it's one joint, but sometimes you can immobilize two or more joints in a sequence. When we talk about splints, we usually mean either some sort of fabric like neoprene. Neoprene, for people who don't know, is the similar sort of material as you would find in like a wetsuit, something like that. So it's got stretch to it. Or the other materials that we use are thermoplastics. So these are low temperature plastics that get heated either in hot air, in an oven, or in water, and they become moldable. So the splints that, again, roughly fall into three types. There's what I'd call soft splints, which are things made out of neoprene. There's semi-rigid splints, which are often things like a neoprene inner, and you can add extra reinforcement, usually by way of a thin plastic, to give extra stability around a particular area. Or there are rigid splints, which are largely made out of plastic. There are sort of additions as well, in that you can have splints that you can put a hinge in, so you can get a joint moving in one plane. You can also reduce that movement, so you can maybe only allow 20 degrees of movement. So they can become, they range from really relatively simple to really quite complex.
Really? Yeah, and using the term splint almost doesn't do justice for the range. And some are really high tech, and others are literally just a piece of neoprene with some Velcro. So exactly. It's a huge array, isn't it?
It is. But basically, you're just effectively immobilizing that joint for a reason.
And it's different degrees of immobilization as well. It's a spectrum of immobilization, rather than everything being hard and fast, solid, don't move.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So what is the splint trying to achieve apart from the immobilization? So we've got stability, we've got maybe some control of pain and proprioception. So explain these for the followers.
Okay. I'm involved with splints for dogs and other animals with arthritis, but also for other reasons. And sometimes they sort of mix, there's a bit of overlap as well. So one of the main reasons why you might want to splint a joint is if you've got loss of stability. So for people who don't know a lot about the anatomy of the joint, normally a joint is where two bones meet, and you need a mechanism for holding those bones together, which is largely the ligaments. So they join bone to bone. And then you've got muscles and tendons that cross over the joint, fascia, and other supporting structures. Now, with degeneration or injury, some of those supporting structures can become damaged, which will cause the joint to move out of its normal plane of movement. And then that in turn causes loss of stability, and it can also cause pain. So, for example, a lateral or a medial ligament rupture would cause the joint to open up on that side and to move more than you would want it to. So sometimes you can use a splint to provide that bit of stability. In arthritis, for example, you get erosion of the joint surface and erosion of the cartilage, and two bone ends that would normally move and glide nicely over each other become roughened and restricted, and might move in a slightly abnormal